Men put on masks all the time. They'll go out party, they'll go on trips and stuff, and they'll pretend like they're happy, they'll smile, when really they're feeling the weight of the world, and they'll struggle in silence. With men, life kicks them down in some way, shape, or form. They don't get the job, or a relationship doesn't work out, and here comes that inner critic again saying, yeah, hey, I was right, wasn't I? Lots of stuff that pops into our minds is often very destructive. Thoughts are nothing more than letters and sounds, and the only time you have to pay attention to them is if they're helpful to you.
You are listening to the Akkeri podcast, a show about men and masculinities, the challenges that modern men face, and how to chart a better way forward. I'm your host, Matt Howlett, mental health coach and founder of the Akkeri. This episode is about self-criticism, how the internal dialogue that we all experience can be very distinct for men, and how we can learn to better manage the thoughts that we have about ourselves. My guest for this conversation is Cortez Hancock, a counseling psychotherapist from Southern Labrador. Through his practice, Priority Health Counseling, he helps people build their mental fitness, prioritize their health, and get back to living the life they want. And in this episode, we talk about several practical tools that men can implement to do just that. But first, dear listener, I feel like I have some splaining to do. It has been at least, maybe five or 6 weeks since I've put out an episode of the Akkeri podcast. And I know that every single one of you are just on the edge of your seats, wondering what is going on. Where has Matt been? Why have I not received a new episode of the Akkeri podcast? I'm sorry. I have nothing else to say, but I was tired. We have been house shopping and house buying and moving into said house, and it is pretty much done now. The settling in process will continue for quite some time, but we have a setup that we are very happy with and adding to that as we go. But let me tell you one thing. When you move around as much as I have from about 2013 or maybe say 2012 until about 2021, 2022, if you listen to the first episode of the podcast, you'll know the story already. But for about 10, 11 years, I did not live in any one place for longer than about 2 years. And it is pretty odd to settle down after that period of time. All good. Been looking forward to it. Have mostly enjoyed it. And when I say mostly, the only part that I haven't fully enjoyed has been the part that has taken me away from this podcast for over a month or so. It's the realizing that all the things that you once had, you just might need to go get again. Like all the things that a homeowner kind of needs. Like I didn't have a level anymore for hanging photos and all the things that a level helps you do. I had a toolbox full of these basics, and I have recovered said toolbox. But a lot of the things that were inside it were appropriated by family members, friends, I really don't know who. And it's totally fine. I mean, it was sitting somewhere for almost a decade. You kind of expect that kind of thing to happen. But that is the story. We are very happy to be in this house. It is an older home, downtown St. John's area, built in 1895, we have learned. It was listed at like 1911. But anywho, I'm not going to bore you with all those details. We are back on track, firing at all cylinders. That sounds stupid. I won't say anything like that ever again, I promise. Let's get into the episode with Cortez. How are you, man?
Good, buddy. Good.
Is this your office setup? I see degrees on the back wall. It's very reassuring.
Yeah, this is the counseling office. Yeah, so where I do my sessions and meet with all the wonderful people that I get to work with.
Cool, man. Well, thanks for taking the time to do this. I'll jump right in. Like I mentioned to you before, I'd love to get like a Coles Notes version of who you are, what you're doing. Just give us an overview. If you're from Labrador, we got to point that out first.
Yeah. From Southern Labrador. Love my hometown. I grew up snowmobiling in the winters and wakeboarding and water skiing and jet skiing in the summers and stuff. So lots of fun, lots of hunting and stuff. After finishing school, I always knew that, I had a desire in my heart to do something to help people. So I went on and did several different degrees. But I started off in Vanguard College doing a theology degree. And then during that time, I got introduced to an introduction to counseling psychology course, and absolutely fell in love with it. From there, I got it in my mind that I wanted to pursue more education to become a counseling psychotherapist. So I went on and did several other degrees and got a master's in counseling psychology. And then, started Priority Health Counseling back in 2020, actually. So my heart and desire was always to, when I got it in my mind that, hey, I do want to pursue a career in counseling and everything. I thought about the fact that I grew up in rural Labrador, and, I'm very aware of the limitations that rural communities have, both in Newfoundland and Labrador, and I'm sure across the nation here. And just knew that it was very difficult to receive support for, when someone was struggling with, any kind of anxiety or stress or, anything affecting people mentally. I always knew that I wanted to make it very accessible to people. And so I wanted to be able to offer my services online because I wanted to make sure that someone wasn't limited by where they lived to be able to receive good quality counseling. When growing up, I witnessed either no services offered in a community, and I've talked to many other people too since then, but, or there's wonderful people providing services, but there's a high turnover rate in some of these small communities and stuff. And so that's really hard on anybody who's, first of all, getting the nerve and the courage to go out for support, and then to feel like, the support or the person who they felt comfortable with, for whatever reason, and no fault of the person, but they may leave, they may move to a different location for them. And so it leaves a lot of people in these rural communities in a lurch. So I really wanted to be able to provide a service that was accessible anywhere. And then COVID, and then COVID hit. So then that was the trend. Everything went online, but yeah, it was, I started in I think it was May 2020 when I really officially launched. And it's been going awesome ever since, actually. Been able to work with some fantastic people from all over Canada, really. Most of the people that I work with are from Newfoundland and Labrador. But I've been able to work with people from all over, or many different reasons, bringing them in. Either through video counseling or through telephone counseling. And it's been a fantastic ride so far. And I love what I do. And I love being able to walk with people and see people, coming in with some things that are very much weighing them down, really heavy stuff that are, people come in with the weight of the world on their shoulders. But through work together, I've been able to see some tremendous successes. It's been pretty awesome.
That's actually awesome. And this is like your 4-year anniversary.
Yeah.
That's great,
4 years at this now, and still going strong.
Started in May 2020.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so
that's a little bit about me, and how I got into counseling.
Yeah, I'm curious about one of the points you mentioned because, I know you a little bit, and I know that we've got a bit of a shared kind of upbringing. Both of us kind of grew up in church context in Newfoundland. Now myself on the island, you in Labrador, but still very similar. And we both actually went to Vanguard as well. Yeah. So you did. Were you studying in the pastoral stream?
I was in youth ministry.
Youth. Okay. Yeah. So you studied. You had more of a youth ministry focus. I had more of a music focus. I'm curious. What was it that made you switch? Like you mentioned, the intro to counseling psychology, but did you have plans to become a pastor? Was that the thinking growing up? What made you switch?
It's my faith and my what I wanted to accomplish, with going to Vanguard was potentially being a youth pastor. But I just, I guess through the journey of it, I didn't lose what I wanted to do. I guess just in a different form. Just a different medium through it. And I think that, that would be, it's kind of where my ministry, I guess, if you want to call it, ministry has led me to is to be, be helping people that are going through, the struggles that they're going through. And I feel like that's how I'm able to serve people in that context. I guess, was never really, losing my desire to, I guess, follow my faith and to be able to provide some kind of service to people. But it was just a switch in where I felt like I wanted to be and how I could be best used, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's great, man. I mean, I see a lot of similarities, obviously, between pastoral ministry and counseling, psychology. The work that I do, and this is all very similar. But I'm curious as well, like when you made that switch and then got into master's, where did you study the master's program?
Mon.
Okay,
Mon.
so you
Memorial
came,
University.
yeah, so you came home, went to Memorial, came home
Yeah.
as in Newfoundland and Labrador. For everybody who doesn't know, sometimes I assume that everybody understands exactly where we're located, but one university on the island and all that. But in that class, and as you have moved into this now for 4 years, what's been the ratio of male to female when it comes to the psychotherapists, the counselors, the different guidance counselors, whatever role they end up taking? But I find I've come across obviously far more women in all of these different fields, not just coaching, but
which is no, you're not wrong. I don't know the statistics off my head, but I can know from my own experiences that I believe in my class there was 2 guys and the rest were women. So yeah, and that was through the program was 2 years and stuff. So yeah, that was the whole time. So and we had a very small select. I can't remember how many they used to let in for the programs. Very small, 10 to 15, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the max in my class, 10 to 15 people. So yeah, it was just 2 of us.
No way.
That was it.
Yeah.
So it's definitely there's definitely a lower representation of men in at least in my class, and you're not obviously from what you're saying that you see it more heavily dominated by the female population.
Yeah, the more that I'm into it, obviously, for example, social media, the way that social media works and the algorithms for all these social tools, they see what you're into, what you're searching for, what, content you're looking at, and feed you more of that. So as I've been in this a little bit longer, I find, there's more male coaches than I expected. And, you even get ads you see other people's content as well. So I see more male psychotherapists, more male psychiatrists, whatever, right? The list goes on. Mm-hmm. But I am curious what you've heard from the men that you've worked with. Do they find it easier to talk to a man? Do they seek out a male therapist? Is there actually a preference?
I definitely think, from my work, first of all, it's very hard. Men are, a lot less likely to reach out for support. At least until they get to a certain point. Mm. But then there's some wild statistics that show that men are definitely struggling and need the support. Just recently, I was in talks with another counselor who's doing some awesome work in the community with men, and he reported a statistic from the chief medical examiner from 2020, which stated that 82% of suicides that were committed in 2020 were men. So 82% of the overall population were men. There's another study he brought up to me, which was done from 1997 to 2014. And it just talked about the suicide rate in Newfoundland and Labrador and how there was a 5-to-1 ratio of men who commit suicide or men who had committed suicide versus the women. And then what was even more striking to me when I read that, that article or that research was that it was 3 times more likely to happen in Labrador versus the Newfoundland portion of the province.
Right.
Which was, for me, from being from Labrador, was really, I guess, kind of struck me in the heart. I was like, oh man, this is really hard to see.
What did you grow up seeing that is leading to that type of statistic?
Yeah, so it depends. Like I'm from the southern part of Labrador, small community called Porto.
Yep.
I can see Newfoundland from where I, from where I live. I can see
Yeah,
the island.
I've driven
It's only
through.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's only like 9 nautical miles. So it's so we grew up, more, I guess, having more access, less isolation, I would say.
Okay.
Like, I lived, 15 minutes from the ferry to Newfoundland, and we would travel all throughout the year. And I think isolation may play a component in that.
Right.
There's other factors of, like isolation, loneliness, a lot of different things that just play, that impact people, and that without proper support and um, without the, I guess, the reaching out, it, depression can really take over people, and can really make people do things that if they were in a place, a more, at their baseline, that they would never ever do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's definitely something that, yeah, like you said, struck home for me
Yeah.
big time.
You mentioned loneliness. I think that's a big one for men, because it's not something that men want to admit to. Has that come up in your practice specifically?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I feel like the thing with men, like I said, when it comes to reaching out for counseling or for support or whatever, I think it goes back to, this whole mentality of, like, be a man, be a man.
Yeah.
And what does that mean? What does it mean to be a man? Well, like most people would say, it means suck it up, push it down, keep going, move forward. I don't know. Like when you hear that, be a man, what comes to your mind? Like, what do you think?
Well, yeah, a lot of the push it down, because we're taught to like avoid emotions, or act like they don't exist, or act like we are able to be who it is that we're expected to be, with, despite the fact that we are, emotional beings. Like, we know that they're there, but we try to avoid them. We're expected, at least, to avoid them, not so much manage them, because I don't think we're taught how to do that.
No, he must. No, definitely not. And this is where I love the fact that, you're doing this kind of work. And there are, people, myself included, that are trying to, change that, to shift that norm, to teach people like emotional regulation, to teach people what it means. So back to your question of loneliness, I think that ties very much into the be a man, because people feel like, there's lots of guys that, men are hurting. Let's put it that way. There's a lot of men that are hurting and struggling, but they kind of raise up in this, be a man. Don't talk about it. Don't tell nobody about it.
Yeah.
And so there's only so long that works, right?
Yeah.
People will turn towards, they'll use coping mechanisms, or different kinds of compulsion. So something that they'll do to try to cope with, check under control difficult thoughts or emotions that they may be feeling. So that could be drugs and alcohol, a big one that we see. That could be gambling. It could be, unhealthy relationships. There's lots of different things that people will do to try and shove it down. The problem with it is, until we root out that underlying thing, until we get to, what's happening, because people will do all those things. They'll do they'll go out and party, and they'll put on a mask. Men put on masks all the time. They'll go out and they'll pretend like they're happy. They'll smile, when really they're feeling the weight of the world on them, whatever's going on with them. And they'll struggle in silence. They'll wear a smile, and they'll struggle. They'll go out, party. They'll go on trips and stuff, and but they'll be, under this massive weight and feeling very alone. And there's lots of times like that's where I see it. When people coming, it's when they get to that breaking point, when the compulsions stop working. It's like I was talking about, they'll do all these things to try and cope with them, until they don't work anymore. Right.
So,
and the underlying cause is still there.
Yeah. So men come to see you, seek help in general, once they've hit a breaking point,
Yeah.
the vice or the, the patterns of behavior are no longer helping them to push it down and to ignore it. It can't be ignored. It's gotten so big. So
Yeah.
what do you see works for that man that is feeling lonely, feeling isolated? Like, how do you get them to recognize, to accept the fact that, I feel lonely, to even be able to say that, I think is a big thing for a man. I recently spoke to an author, Stephen Randall, and he said after he lost his son was an addict, and that's what his book was about. And I was talking to him about several different things, one of them being that. And he mentioned in therapy, it took him over a year before he was able to say, I feel sad, like I am sad. So how, in your practice, like what do you find works to get men to not only just accept and admit where they're at, but then dig into the root cause?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So, the first thing is, when they first come in, that's where I often see most men, they're coming in because they are at that breaking point, right? It's either coming to these sessions or, it's often, if we don't get them here, it could be, very life threatening for men. Like that, it's going back to that 5-to-1 ratio. It's that 82%. Because it gets to that point. I often use like a little illustration of a battery life. And it starts out in green and then it goes down to like yellow, then orange, then red. And it's a little meter and it says like, ask for help here, like when you get down to the yellow. Right. But most often when it comes to men is they don't ask for help there. They're down into the red, almost into the empty place. Yeah. And that's when it gets very dangerous. So majority of people that I see are coming in a state of desperation because, they've tried it for so long and they're almost ready to talk about it. At least in my experience, they're at that place where they're like, or at least the top, the thing that they're really dealing with, like I'm really struggling, or, I'm struggling with anxiety, or I'm struggling with depression or stress or whatever. And they'll talk about that initial thing, but then we'll have to do the work to say, okay, well, how did we get here? Yeah. What happened? And it's through, I feel like, first of all, being relatable. Just being able to relate and connect with people. A lot of, especially, people from rural communities, like out around the Bay, as we say in Newfoundland. Sure. Being able to say like, I love fishing too, or I love, ice fishing. I love skidoos. I love, boil ups or fires in the woods.
Right. So making that personal connection.
Well, like making that connection, being able to, and that's what I always say in my first sessions, like, we're going to take time so that, first of all, I'll say, I give two options. I can say, if you feel like you want to, we'll dive right into whatever's bringing you in and you take the lead. I always want them, people I'm working with to know that they're behind the steering wheel. But I'll say, like, another thing I can do is just tell you a little bit about myself, my hobbies, my interests, how I grew up, so that a little bit about me and I'm not just some random stranger on a screen. Right. And I feel like that I know, if I was on the other side of things, I know that at least being able to have some kind of connection and feel like I kind of know the person a little bit and know what they're all about, or know kind of their interests and what they're into, and finding connection and relatability there, that takes a little bit of guard down, where it's it's a little more safe to be able to say, okay, yeah, I can kind of open up a little bit about what's going on. And it's not easy for any man because of that place of being a man.
Yeah. You're taking a risk. You're taking a risk for sure.
You are. It's a major risk. But it's from my experience, it's a really powerful place when you are, when the person is willing to do that, they're willing to let that guard down and talk about those things, because there's something very cathartic in that, something very healing of the mind and the heart. When you're able to put this down and say, hey, I'm struggling with this, instead of carrying it, right? Instead of going around with the mask on. I'm okay. I'm fine.
Yeah. So what specifically, what practices do you find? Like, so once that guard's down, once the man, is, at a level of comfort with you where they're willing to open up and give some detail to what it is that they see as their main struggle, how do you help them to really flush that out?
Yeah. So, one of the things that I do is, first of all, by helping them see that the mind is often full of crap. so,
Yeah.
so lots of stuff that pops into our minds is often not helpful. Is often very, I guess, destructive. It's very oppressive. I think, in some of our past conversations, I called it the inner dictator.
Yeah.
Or some people refer to it as kind of like the devil on the shoulder,
Yeah. Devil on the shoulder, the inner critic, the dictator.
The inner critic, the dictator, the radio doom and gloom is another term I've heard.
Okay.
The first thing that I often try to help people see is that they got this, inner critic or inner dictator kind of going on inside their mind, saying, don't be a burden on your friends. Don't talk about that.
Right.
Don't tell me anybody your struggles. Just be a man, suck it up.
Right. Because the man's supposed to be strong.
Right. Exactly. And then that same inner one thing, man, it's unreal to say that it's, the more I get to work with people, the more I see, the similar internal struggles that totally different people will have the same kind of inner critic going on. With men, it's often you're a failure. You're a loser. No one's going to love you. You'll never have, the things that you'll never have a family. You'll never be successful. You'll never be that kind of stuff. And they feel like they can't talk about that, or they're struggling and life kicks them down in some way, shape, or form. They don't get the job, or the relationship doesn't work out or something. And then here comes that inner critic again saying, yeah, hey, I was right, wasn't I? Yeah. You didn't get it. That didn't happen. And then, that's so, like I said, so destructive and so oppressive for people to have that. But first thing I do is to be able to say, you can't believe everything your mind's telling you. Like, that inner critic is full of crap. There's lots of times that I teach people to recognize. One thing that I tell people is a definition that I've learned from one of my mentors is that thoughts are nothing more than letters and sounds. And the only time you have to pay attention to them is if they're helpful to you. That's it. So being able to, first of all, help them to, untangle from that, to be able to separate from that and realize that, that's not truth. That's not a prediction of your future. That's not a fact about you. That's not something that you have to buy into. And be able to see that, their value is not dictated by these intrusive thoughts that they're having or whatever they're caught up in. So being able to separate from that, first off, is something that's extremely important.
Yeah.
And that's not a one and done thing. That's a daily thing of learning skills on how to unhook from that. And then the next thing is, okay, so then where do we go from there? So then we determine, okay, well, what are things that what are things that are valuable to you? What are things that are important to you that, if you live to 103 or whatever, and you're looking back on your life, what do you want to be able to say, yeah, I was able to, live true to those different values in my life. So, for example, someone who wants to take care of their health. So they're consistently able to eat healthy and improve on their body all the time. So they're going to gym. Or maybe there's someone who's passionate and sees a lot of value in education, and they were a lifelong learner.
Right.
And so that way they can say, you know what, I lived true to what I wanted to do with my life. So it's about, first of all, it's about unhooking from the crap, that the trap that's going on in the mind. And helping them to do that. The next is to help them to rediscover, first of all, their value in themselves, as well as, what they want in their lives. How do they want, what kind of life do they want to build for themselves? And to be able to accept the fact that or practice a lot of acceptance. Actually, that's one of the core components of what I work with people on, is to be able to accept the things that pop in their head, because I don't go about trying to tell people like, you're going to be able to never think a certain thought again, because there's an exercise that I do with people, and I say, if I told you right now, don't think of a pink elephant, what does your brain do? Your brain starts to think of a pink elephant. That's immediately what it does. So I teach people, like, the second that we say, okay, I don't ever want to have some of these negative, real nasty dictator thoughts again, immediately the brain's going to say, what do you not want to think about? This pink elephant that you're trying to tell me not to think about?
Yeah.
So it kind of throws it in your head. So instead, I teach people to practice a form of, scientific term is acceptance, but I like to call willingness. So willingness to allow that stuff to kind of float in, but not buy into it, to be able to say, kind of like a cloud in the sky, we drive to work, we ride motorcycles, we have conversations, and there's clouds in the sky. They can be there. Now, you can spend all day shaking your fist at a cloud and saying, that's the only thing I'm going to focus on. And that's where all your time and energy goes to.
Right.
Or you can practice willingness and say, hey, that can be there, but I'm going to have a wonderful conversation with my friend right now.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to go engage in, softball tournament, or,
Sure.
I'm going to go do something that brings joy and value to my life.
Right. So teaching someone to shift the focus. Exactly.
Pivoting away from, pink elephanting yourself. So trying to get rid of the thing that I don't want to think about this, because that's a big thing that I see in a lot of clients. Everybody comes to sessions saying, okay, teach me how to never have this, come into my head again.
Yeah.
And, the second that we try to go about doing that, we're setting a trap up for ourselves.
You mentioned a minute ago, teaching them specific skills to do that. And obviously it's not a one and done thing. It's a daily thing. Mm-hmm. Can you speak a little bit to, like, maybe even an example or specific, modalities that you work with that are effective for that?
Yeah, sure. So, one, I'll teach people, so going back to the idea of, separating from the internal dictator, or recognizing that. There's one that I learned, and now I practice teaching other people, is naming the story. So I'll give an example. So this is a unhooking strat. And Newfoundland, Labrador, we're all about fishing. So I say it's unhooking. The technical term is diffusion, but it's called fusion and diffusion. Fusion is when we're caught up in the thought, I'm a loser, I'm a failure. Diffusion is being able to separate ourselves from that thought, or I like to say unhooking. So naming the story, if I gave a example, say I had a client that was coming in and really struggling with, I'm a failure. I didn't reach, I'm never going to accomplish my goals. Like they're really caught up in this. And so I would say, okay, so we're going to do a diffusion exercise here now. So if and I'll get them, usually what I like to do is someone who is kind of like an icon or a famous person who people kind of like look up to, or, I'll say, okay, so like who's a famous actor or actress, say, like, and, for guys, I'll say, sometimes they'll have they may say like, if they're younger generation, they might say The Rock. If they're older, they might say Arnold Schwarzenegger, or someone Jason Statham, or something like that. So, anyways, I'll say we'll use The Rock for example. So, I'll say, okay, so walk with me on this imaginary illustration here. So, The Rock is going on a picnic with his family. They're going to the beach, and he's got everything loaded up. They're driving, and they he realizes he's forgot, like, the drinks. He forgot the soda and the water and stuff. So he says, okay, I'll flick into the grocery store and I'll pick up the drinks. And so he goes there and gets the drinks and goes up to the checkout. And like most grocery stores, they have like the magazines, tabloids and stuff there. Yep. So I say that, he sees this tabloid. This particular tabloid is called BS Magazine. And so it has a picture of him and big, huge, an unflattering picture where he's kind of making, an unflattering face, and has a big caption that says, and I'll use something simple like, The Rock hates puppy dogs.
Sure.
And they'll laugh.
Yeah.
And they'll laugh. And so he has two options, two paths in that scenario. One, he could get very angry and upset, and slam the water down and storm out and say, this is defamation of character. They're lying about me. I have 3 dogs at home. They're lying. It's going to hurt my fan base. It's going to hurt my career. So he storms out of the store and he jumps aboard his car and he says, picnic's canceled. Got to go home. I got to handle this. So drives home, drops the kids and the wife off, and he goes in, he calls up his lawyers and they get on the phone, they call BS Magazine, and they say, we're going to, you got to retract this story or we're going to sue. And BS Magazine says, we don't care. We're going to print whatever stories we want. And so he's raging. He's so angry. And he's angry all night until he finally just passes out. And then he gets up the next day and he's still angry. So he rushes back to the grocery store and he sees a new magazine with a new caption that says, The Rock hates puppy dogs and kitty cats. Right. So it's, it's another story. And so he can continue on down this journey, for ever. Every day he can go and there's a new magazine and there's a new story every day. And the BS Magazine says, we're going to print whatever story we want. You can't stop us. Yeah. So that's option one. Option two, so Rock goes to the store, picnic, needs to get the drinks, gets the drinks, goes to the cash register and sees the magazine that says, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson hates puppy dogs. And he can then, option two is he looks at it and he says, what, that's not very nice, but those are just letters and sounds. And he buys the drinks, and goes out and gets in the car and he goes have a wonderful day with his wife and kids on the beach. Right. So which option do we, does sound better to us, right? And so that's the idea is, and then often what I'll do with the client is I'll say, okay, so now, John Doe, you go to the store, you see the magazine that says, John Doe is a failure. Yeah. Right. So you have an option. You go home, call your lawyers, you can spend all day and all night fighting with this and every day for the rest of your life. Or you can recognize that for letters and sounds written on a page that has no prediction of your future, no definition of who you are. It's nothing. It's just magazine on the wall, and it's called BS Magazine on the rack. And so what seems like a more valuable use of your time and energy?
Right. So you're helping guys to make that distinction and be able to separate themselves somewhat.
To be able to separate themselves from, whatever the internal dialogue that's unhelpful. So I always ask yourself, I always ask people, the only time we have to pay attention to a thought is if it's helpful to building the life we want to build. If it's not, let it on the rack, leave it on the rack. It's a very effective tool. And what I always, the first thing that I tell my clients all the time, I'll use Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson again, is I say, if I was to look at you and say, I'm going to build my muscles the same as Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. I'm going to get huge and swole just like Dwayne "The Rock." And I said, I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to lift one dumbbell one time. Would you say that I'm going to be, and I'm going to walk out, and if I'm not instantly Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, would you agree with me that the gym doesn't work? Right. And everybody laughs and says, no, obviously not. And I said, well, why not? I said, well, you have to be consistent. You have to be, you have to be consistent. You have to be regular. You have to continue to go and continue to lift and continue to increase your weight. And that's the same thing with, I like the term building our mental fitness. People don't come to sessions often feeling very in shape internally with their mental fitness. It's often they've often through various coping strategies that eventually stop working for them. That's what ends up, they say, okay, I can't do this anymore, especially men. I can't do this anymore. So I either got to go get some extra help or I'm going to find myself in a very dark place.
Yeah, that's a helpful, that's a really helpful analogy, I think. Using the idea of fitness, working out, especially if you're already talking about The Rock and puppies. Yeah. Because you're already thinking about this massive dude that, you know, some guys, want to emulate a little bit. But I wonder, have you seen, describe that breakthrough moment for me for a little bit? Just paint that picture of what that end result, that end goal is actually like when the guy realizes I can just leave that thought on the rack. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And like,
Yeah.
obviously I'm not looking for a specific example from your practice, but just in general,
Yeah.
because I think a lot of guys struggle to really see that end goal as something that's worth working towards daily. You know what I mean? I've
Absolutely.
seen that. I'm thinking of, one or two guys specifically where when I saw that moment where they were really getting it and getting excited, you know what I mean? So they've been consistent and they're finally starting to see results. What does that look like for you? I mean, you've had that, you're smiling.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's, well, let's go back to the mental fitness, physical fitness comparison. It's so consistent, and we're holistic beings. It's all connected and stuff, right? So the same thing with physical fitness and mental fitness. There is no magic pill.
Right.
There is no magic exercise. I'm sorry to say that to anybody who's looking for the magic pill that they can take and everything's all right, or the magic one and done dumbbell lift mental health version of that that they can do and it's all done. It doesn't work like that. We're not designed like that. So when people and that's what I really try to stress with my clients when I'm working with them. Like, listen, I'm being I can guarantee you this, that from my experience from working with people, I can guarantee you that if you do it once and one time, it will absolutely not work. You will walk away and say counseling doesn't work. Or these, if someone gets placed on a certain medication or whatever, and they take it one time or whatever, and it doesn't work. And that's why I use that analogy of the one dumbbell one time versus what do you got to do to become muscular and build up your muscles like Dwayne Johnson. We have to be consistent. You have to be ever increasing and using all these different exercises. And so when people commit to that, when they say, okay, I will use these, different skills, I'll implement them on the regular basis. And I don't ever let anybody that I work with leave without giving them homework. There's always we'll say a workout plan when they leave, like you have to be doing this. And it's always up to the other person on the other side of this call to either do it or not do it.
Yeah.
But when they do it, and you said I was smiling, because it's one of the most, as a counselor, it's incredibly rewarding to see someone who could possibly or potentially may have been in a life-threatening situation internally before when they first came to now thriving. When people are healing, when their mental health is improving, when their mental fitness is improving, they're healing, they start doing things that, they once were passionate about, whether it's depression or if it was anxiety where they, couldn't get out to things that they were passionate before. That their anxiety had robbed them of so many things in their life, and all of a sudden they're getting back to those things.
Right.
They're getting back into outings or sports or whatever that they used to do.
The things that they love that light them up.
The things that they love, the values, the things that they value in their life, the building the life that they want to have.
Yep.
And they come back and, they're elated, they're coming in and they're like, hey, I made it to that thing. And as a counselor, I get the privilege to journey along with them. So I'm in front row of where they started to where they are now. And it's just, it's moving, man. It's emotional because it's so exciting to see that they're able to get their life back. Mm-hmm. Because with men and everything, like I said, it gets to that red to almost empty bar where it's very dangerous before oftentimes. And I would like to continue and do the same work that you're doing to continue to help people to get to the yellow bar, to reach out before they get to that detrimental point. So when we see them, that heavy gray cloud kind of lift off them, we see them enjoying time with their family or starting to find joy in life again. and give back. Oftentimes when people are healing, they start giving back to others. That's another thing that I've seen. And it's just,
and
it's
then,
amazing.
then they're finding satisfaction outside of themselves,
exactly,
which is even more, at least for me, even more personally rewarding. Like, today, I was out with my fiance. We did something that we both enjoy and spend time together. That's satisfying. We went to a cafe that we like that's outside of town. Shout out to Dark Star Coffee Roasters in Carbonear, Newfoundland.
Nice.
Mark and the team, you guys are awesome. Great coffee, great baked goods. Everybody should check it out. But yeah, so that was very satisfying for both of us, but it's even more satisfying when I get to do something for someone. And I'll use Dana again, because it's a safe bet. She was on a work trip a little while ago, and just when she came back, I just had like a fun sign made and showed up at the airport, and just made a bit of a big deal out of it, right? And it's so simple and so dumb, right? I just made a funny sign, and I had a photo of her that she doesn't like from when she was a kid. So I got a bit of an eye roll, right? But we similar sense of humor and just making that moment special. You know what I mean? As simple as that is, you get a lot of satisfaction because I'm making someone else smile. And I know, like, personally, I get a lot of joy from doing things for other people. I would think that a lot of other men do as well. But even discovering that, I think would be amazing for some men. Like the simple joy out of doing something for someone else and shifting the focus from your own circumstances, your own challenges to someone else's. Yeah, that's, I really like, I think about what you said about acceptance. I think that's a big part of that, because you have to be able to know that you're riding a bit of a wave when it comes to your own challenges, your feelings and emotions, your thoughts. You know what I mean? You're always going to see magazines on the rack, like that illustration that you used, right? They're going to come and go all the time. To a certain extent, we don't control, like, the passing thoughts. Yeah. But the ability to accept ourselves, that is a learned skill, I think, for all of us, but especially for men. Yeah. And I don't know, man, that's a challenge, but that is something that I've seen as a bit of a turning point for the guys that I talk to, when they are able to recognize that, we're emotional beings, that the feelings that I've been feeling are valid. They might feel really big, and, society tells men to push it down. But when we are able to get to that place where we accept that we're emotional beings and these things are normal, right? We don't have to push it down, and it's actually healthier not to, right? Well,
think of it. I've used this example before. If someone has, those different kinds of intrusive thoughts or emotions, they're starting to struggle with, stuff, and they're turning towards different vices. They'll turn towards the vices rather than come and speak to someone, right? Instead of acknowledging, I am an emotional being. There is, it would be healthy to talk with this, versus someone who starts to have chest pain. Right. Someone will, any man, majority of men that I know, they'll, if they start to have chest pain, they'll be like, okay, I gotta go to the doctor. I gotta go get this checked out. Versus the, the mental health or well-being version of chest pain, they'll say, okay, I'm going to drink some more, or I'm going to, bury myself in, just some unhelpful habit, which is trying to distract, or I'm going to, binge watch my favorite TV show or whatever. And it's not necessarily saying there's anything wrong with watching TV or whatever, but like, these are the things that we do when it comes, especially as guys, when it comes to our mental health. We won't treat it the same way as people with like a heart attack or a broken arm or whatever. And what happens when you leave a broken arm or you leave a heart, your heart eventually, if you don't get it checked out, if we went about it the same route, applied the same actions that we do with mental health to physical health, where you leave your heart that's not working properly to the point until where you either end up in cardiac arrest or you end up dead, or say, for example, a broken leg or a broken arm. Like if you treated that the same way, I'm just going to, have a drink. My arm's broken, I'm just gonna have a drink, or I'm gonna, do whatever and just ignore it. What happens? Well, it gets worse. It gets rotten. It gets infected. It could, you could end up losing an arm. It could end up, going into the rest of your body. And that's the same thing with mental health. it ends up, kind of getting worse and affecting other areas in our bodies,
Yeah.
in our lives. And, the thing of, I guess the goal of your work, my work, and what we do here is to help people to see, like, as men, as you said, we are, it's just a part of our makeup that, thoughts, feelings, and stuff, we have them.
Yeah.
And you're certainly no less of a man to, get that off your chest, to talk about it. It's actually very, like I said, it's very healing when you learn the appropriate techniques that can help you to, like we talked about, unhook from those things,
Yeah.
to be able to recognize your own worth, your own value, to be able to pivot back towards the things that are life-giving and valuable to you. But those are exercises.
Yeah.
It's like,
I love that analogy. I think that's very helpful to understand it that way. Because I think, I think it's a fair assumption that most men kind of understand the world of fitness. At least it is kind of forefront in society. It's, preached, I would say, it's through social media for sure. So if you're living in that world, if you're using the different apps and whatever, TikTok, Instagram, whatever, there are so many fitness influencers these days.
Yeah.
So you're definitely, at least I find, maybe pressured is the right word towards, being fit. And the expectation is there for men to be physically strong. But I think that analogy is very helpful because, like you said, it's not a one and done. You can't go to the gym, lift a dumbbell, have a workout, or even a week of workouts and expect to, lose weight, gain muscle, be stronger, be healthier, all those things. And to what you just said a minute ago, it's worse mentally when you're not fit. If there's something that's going awry and you're not really dealing with it appropriately, it could affect any number of systems. Because, like you said, everything's integrated. So, if for one man, you might have chest pain, and that could actually be you suppressing, some experience in your life that hasn't really been processed, some deep emotional trauma. You know what I mean? And for some guys, like, it comes out as like, headaches, or some guys have skin issues, you know what I mean? Because the body is just so wild that way. We don't understand.
100%. Yeah. It's all connected. Like I said, it's people get nauseated, they get sick, they get migraines, like you said, chest pains, that kind of stuff. Your blood pressure goes up, if you don't know how to manage these things.
Well, even for me this week, I think I mentioned this to you the last time that we spoke. We've been house hunting, found one, working through that process, and we're in like the final stages of, hoping to get the keys soon. And it's been a big thing for both of us. Obviously, buying a house is massive anyways, but just, knowing our stories and the past, like maybe decade plus of years and what we've both gone through and how we found each other now. And it's something that we're both really, really looking forward to and can't wait for it to happen. And I've lost sleep this week.
Yeah.
And it's an odd thing for me because sleep is always something I've been very good at. I'm fairly consistent with it, but I can fall asleep at the drop of a hat. And if I wake up in the middle of the night, which I don't do often, but sometimes if I wake up, get back in bed, I'm gone. And I haven't been able to do that this week.
Yeah.
And that's wild, right? So I'm like journaling and digging into that. I'm talking to Dana about that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I know that if I don't, like it's probably related to the stress and the anxiety, looking forward to this, making sure it happens. And you know what I mean? All the thoughts and feelings related to this process that, this waiting period that we're in, because we feel like we're in limbo, right? We know it's going to happen pretty much, right? But
absolutely.
It's wild, man.
Yeah, no, that's very normal actually. And it's something that I commonly see with people is, men and women that I work with. When something's on the go, their sleep is impacted. They're more susceptible to, getting whatever cold or virus that's going on.
Yeah.
All of that is, it's like I said, it's all connected, and not having the appropriate tools to lift it. You talk about, the mental fitness level. When this stuff comes up, because and that's something that I always tell the people that I work with, This is not going to make all obstacles go away in your life forever. That's not it. What we're doing here is, we're building your mental fitness so that when those obstacles come up, think of weights in the gym.
Yeah.
So like, you don't go to the gym to avoid lifting weights. You go to the gym so you can lift that weight and continue to move up in those weights. And so with the things that we accomplish in, our sessions and counseling sessions and stuff, that teaches, an individual how to lift that stuff when it comes up. And you just said some wonderful things, like you said, journaling, which I often hear people, especially guys, they're like, last time I journaled, I was in like grade 4. And I tell people, I'm like, absolutely, I was 100% the same way. And I always tell my clients too, that none of the stuff that I do in session, none of the things that I teach, do I not also practice those things as well.
Right.
Like I do everything that I teach, the people I work with in sessions, I practice in my daily life, because I'm not without, not without stress. I'm not without obstacles in life. And, I fully wholeheartedly believe in the things that I work with people on. And so journaling is definitely one of them. I feel like it's like the Swiss Army knife of working, of helping individuals and helping improve our mental fitness, because it allows people to, like I said earlier, either in sessions or when putting the stuff that's kind of weighing on us, stress out about a house, is this going to happen? All those internal thoughts that come up, this is not going to work out, the fear, the anxiety picks in, it's not going to happen. Oh my gosh, what are we going to do then?
Yep.
All that stuff. And again, it's not truth. It's not a prediction of your future. It's just those letters and sounds kind of floating through your head, but they are very, very, heavy, and they're very, they're causing an emotional response. And so what do we do with that? Well, do you fight with it or do you sit with it? No, the brain is all about, the brain is about two things. It is about protecting us, and it's about conserving energy. And so if we can find a place to put all those anxieties, all that stress down, the brain kind of has like an aha moment that says, oh, okay, so Matt put all this stress about the house down.
Yeah.
So now I don't have to keep reminding Matt of all the things that he's stressed out about.
Exactly.
And that's what a journaling can do. And then it goes from like, oh my gosh, my brain is so full, I can't handle this, I'm feeling overwhelmed, to like a very much more of a manageable place of, okay, I can kind of breathe a little bit easier. Okay, I know that this is going to work out, and I can put this down. So it's an excellent tool.
Yeah, just to be clear, we are not talking about any type of like Dear Diary, like today I went to the cafe. Yeah, this is like, what am I feeling and thinking? What has been happening that I need to get off my chest? Like how can I focus in on what it is that is bothering me, what it is that I'm like maybe thinking too much about. I tend to think of it in like what has happened to me, what am I thinking about that might happen to me, what is happening right now in the moment, like what am I feeling? And honestly, meditation helps me get to that, just sitting with those feelings. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I find journaling to be very helpful, because then you can not only write down and focus in, kind of flush out what it is that is bothering you, that is on your mind, that it does feel like a weight, but then you can figure out something to do with that. You know what I mean? Like doing like a brain dump once a week. You know what I mean?
That's I was just going to say, so, having a plan, like figuring out, okay, how am I going to solve this kind of thing? This is why I call the journal the Swiss Army knife, because that's one of those tools that can come out of the journal. But another tool is the brain dump, which my version of the brain dump that I tell people to do is, if you're waking up at 3 a.m. in the morning, your mind's going wild, and you're just totally, your brain is shooting thoughts at you rapidly, like just, on fire. I tell people, do a brain dump where literally all you do is every single word or thought that pops in your head, you just write it out. Or some people, they type it out, like, use notes on their phone or their music. And when you do that, it's almost like you're so overwhelmed, you have all these things in your brain. It's almost like a fire hydrant that's just spraying out, and it's so overwhelming, it's so powerful. But when you dump it all out like that, and you keep going until it starts to slow down.
Yeah.
It's almost like that fire hydrant starts to like trickle down, and you just get this like little stream coming out, and it's extremely helpful in those moments when we're feeling so overwhelmed. Just another one of those, Swiss Army tools.
Forces you to slow down. Yeah, it forces you to slow down, forces you to, it helps you to get some of that busy brain stuff, out, exactly what's going through your mind. I would love to finish up here and not take up too much more of your time, but if you could speak to that man directly, that is like, you mentioned the idea of like the gas gauge going down to yellow or any type of battery life gauge there, going down to yellow, getting to empty, not quite hitting that wall yet. You know what I mean? The relationship is not on the rocks quite yet. The health issues aren't quite strong enough yet to push them to give you a call or reach out for help in some way. What would you say to them if you can kind of, put it into a few thoughts?
I would say, you're not alone. You are not alone, and you are not meant to just kind of power through this on your own, because, for many of the men that have been going through it, they already see that, powering through, pulling your bootstraps up, it's not getting any easier. The mask is getting heavier. And that by coming or by, making that phone call or sending that email, hey, I'm looking to reach out, looking to have a chat. That's the step to getting your life back. I've heard stories of men that, prior to taking that leap, they went, years where everything that used to bring them joy in life was gone. They went like years, like 2 or 3 years, zero joy, just kind of wading through life and still holding on, but just barely until they finally made that decision to come out. And it's, it goes back to that, idea of like, if you have a broken arm, you keep leaving it, it's gonna just continue to progress to a place where it's going to impact other parts of your life. And why would we do that? Don't let your arm fall off. Like get to a place that can help you heal, help you see things from a different perspective instead of that internal dictator's perspective. And so that you can start, building life that you want to be building, and not, instead of just surviving, you start thriving. Really, that's what I would tell them. And start building your mental fitness. You're building the outside. Let's build the inside.
Yeah, I love that. Love that analogy. I think that's super helpful. Thank you for listening. I hope you found some value in this episode. If you have, be sure to share the Akkeri podcast with a friend and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You can find the Akkeri on socials at The Akkeri and on the web at theakkeri.com. And you can find Cortez on his website, priorityhealthcounseling.com, as well as on Facebook, facebook.com/priorityhealthcounseling.